So just to start off, we have our informal sector webinar series from the Global Action Partnership for EPR, GAP for EPR. To give you a bit of an introduction, national partnership established between GIC, UNEP, and WWF. It is hosted by the Prevent Waste Alliance, and we receive circular economy support from the Ellen MacArthur Foundation. And this can be seen as the one-stop shop for EPR. It's an international think and do tank that connects circular economy practitioners worldwide. And before we begin, we just want to give a small disclaimer that the views and opinions of the speakers do not necessarily reflect the positions of the GAP for EPR. And so to kick off, our speaker today that we have for recognizing Malaysia's informal recycling sector, a pillar for effective EPR implementation. Today we have Roberto Beneteo. He is the CEO of Malaysia's first voluntary industry-led EPR platform dedicated to improving packaging waste management and recycling rates. He is a seasoned corporate sustainability expert. Roberto supports businesses in advancing circular economy practices through EPR, recycling, and sustainability strategies. And with over 30 years of senior roles across Europe and Southeast Asia, Roberto brings deep experience into corporate management and stakeholder engagement. So without further ado, I will hand over to Roberto.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Lucy. Thank you very much for having me this afternoon. Just confirm that you can hear me properly, that everything is technically sound, so I can progress. All good? Excellent. Okay, so I can see that people are joining. Let's start by pronouncing my surname correctly, which is Benetello. and my name is Roberto. I've been in Southeast Asia for 12 years and currently in Malaysia. And since 2023, actually, I'm the CEO of the Malaysian Recycling Alliance. Let me just share the screen with my deck. And again, please confirm that you can see.
Yes, but it's blank slide right now.
Coming. All right. So you should see the first slide and okay. All right. So yes, I've been in Malaysia for 12 years, and for the last 3 and a bit working with the Malaysia Recycling Alliance. The Malaysia Recycling Alliance is a coalition that was formed in 2021 by some very prominent brand owners in the fast-moving consumer goods. They wanted to pioneer, they wanted to be ahead of the curve with the introduction of extended producer responsibility in Malaysia. And they wanted to specifically work with the government and the important institutional stakeholders in Malaysia to introduce a solid policy framework on extended producer responsibility that would be conducive to, a good recovery rate, but also for the industry to with the government of Malaysia to lead this process. In 2023, when I started, the focus, the objective that was the target that was given to me was to set up pilot projects. So we started working immediately, looking into different type of projects that we would set up throughout Malaysia, in the Peninsula Malaysia, and also in Sabah and Sarawak, which are the 2 states, the Malaysian states in the Borneo Island. And over the last 2 years and a bit, we've been doing all these projects, and these projects have taught us a lot. All the critical issues about EPR implementation, what are the bottlenecks, what are the challenges, what are the things that are hindering the implementation of EPR. And definitely one of the things that we had to discover and on which we learned quite a bit is how the informal sector contributes to collection for recycling, and how important the informal sector would be in EPR implementation in Malaysia. So this is going to be the topic of my presentation today, and recognizing and integrating the informal sector into EPR implementation in Malaysia. We start by looking at a little bit of context. Some of you may be already familiar, but bear with me. So first of all, it's important to say that the informal sector is big in terms of size and in terms of contribution. It's estimated that 15 to 20 million informal waste workers are active in the global south, okay, especially in recovering recyclables. The informal sector has been recycling for many years, and currently they collect 31 million tons per year, which accounts for close to 60% of the global plastic recycled. So you may find different numbers from different sources. You have the reference here of the source that I used. But believe me that the contribution of the informal sector is extremely relevant, and especially in the global south. And the other important factor is that the informal sector rely quite a bit on the revenue, on the income that comes from collecting and selling recyclables, especially where there is value, which is plastics and metal. So it's a very important component of this value chain. So the informal sector is highly critical in the existing collection flows of recyclables in the global south, and that includes Malaysia, but face extreme economic pressure and instability. And another thing that it's important to mention is that there's no one informal sector. The informal sector takes different shapes and forms depending on where you are, depending on the country where you're in, depending on the GDP of that particular country, social conditions, and so on and so forth. So it's really, really important to understand who you're dealing with and what are the different segments, the different components of the informal sector. So you may have, in Argentina, the cartoneros and some other type of informal sector in India, or waste banks in Indonesia. So the factors that influence the informal sectors, and how the morphology of the informal sector, the shape and the components, how the informal sector is actually operating in a given country, depends on the urbanization. In fact, rapid urbanization, where recycling systems have not evolved as centrally planned infrastructure, they are very conducive to the informal sector being active, where there is a residual monetization value for solid waste materials. So, that's the ability for them to make money in trading and selling and collecting these kind of materials. Physical access of recyclables to waste pickers, and the urban population facing financial and social insecurity. So these are all factors that one way or another influence the shape and form of the informal sector. In the global south, the informal collectors are not marginal actors. They're often the primary interface between waste generation and recycling. So that's a very important point that we need to make at start. So why this discussion is critical. For us in Malaysia, it's critical because last month, the government of Malaysia made it official that there is now a path towards mandatory EPR. It will become mandatory 1st of January 2030, and between now and the 1st of January 2030, there is a formal voluntary EPR system. So this is now being acknowledged and officialized by the government. The recycling targets are increasing faster than the system capacity. So when EPR becomes mandatory, companies will be given recovery targets that will start with 40% and they will increase to 60, 70% in the coming years. And currently, with the current configuration of waste management and collection for recycling in Malaysia, this is not possible. So we have big challenges ahead of us. Collection is definitely the binding constraint. So that collection is the bottleneck. We need to find a way to integrate EPR and EPR legislation into the current collection system and also find new ways to improve the collection system. And definitely for us, working with the informal sector is critical. And early stage interception determines EPR success. What we mean for that is that we recognize the fact that when we collect from households, it's extremely important that that interception, when we collect recyclables directly from households, the recyclables need to be already separated. They need to be separated at source. They need to be clean. They need to be of good quality, and they need to be collected as much as possible, which is something that is not happening right now. So if we look at some of the challenges that we have in Malaysia regarding the post-consumer recycling reality, we have definitely demand challenges that are linked primarily to the fact that in Malaysia we don't have a mandatory percentage of recycled content into packaging. Okay, so basically there's no policy from the government that states that fast-moving consumer goods need to use a specific percentage of recycled content into packaging, and that makes the demand for secondary raw material not so strong. We have very low cost of landfill disposals. Okay, so this makes landfill disposals the best and the cheapest option, and in this condition it's very difficult to compete. We do have very poor separation at source, so low recyclable quality because very often there is heavy contamination when recyclables are collected, especially contamination with organic matters of food, for example. So there's very little education of consumers in that respect. There is a lack of public sector alignment. It means that the municipal solid waste system in Malaysia is organized to collect for landfill, not collect for recycling. Okay, so if you also look at the contractual obligation between the concessioners are large companies with a government concession license to collect solid waste from households. So if you look at the contract between the government and these large concessionaires, we have 3 of them in Malaysia. The contract does not create any incentive for these companies to collect for recycling. And that is a big structural struggle that we're having in Malaysia, and we are definitely advocating for a change in that respect. So as I said at the beginning, one of the biggest um, tasks for me and for my team over the last few years was to understand the intricacies of um, the waste management system in Malaysia. And again, I don't expect you to understand fully this chart, which is quite complicated and cluttered with a lot of different boxes. But I just wanted to share with you the complexity of the matter that we're dealing with, and I'm sure that it's very similar to other countries to other systems in other countries in other jurisdictions. So on the far left, you have the waste generation. Okay, waste generation that for post-consumer packaging is basically the household. Okay, and then you have two systems of collection. One, a formal system that you see in blue at the top, and then you have the informal collection at the bottom. Yeah. The formal collection is normally handled by these concessionaires. So these entities, these large companies with the concession by the government and paid by the central government to collect waste. And then in some states, actually in Malaysia, they have a state waste collection contractor appointed by the state government. So, but it's kind of unique. But I would say that normally the concessionaires do the job. The concessionaires then take the waste in material recovery facility, and that is another big problem that we don't have enough. There are very, very little MRFs, material recovery facilities in Malaysia, and where the sorting happens, the division between what can be recycled and what cannot be recycled. And then some sorting also happens during the collection. We call it truck sorting. Sometimes you see all these trucks with big bags. We call them jumbo bags on the side, where the crew of that particular vehicle of the truck, they fill these bags with Coca-Cola bottles, PET bottles, and other recyclables. And then they take whatever cannot be recycled to landfill, which for the formal collection is most of it. If you look at the bottom, you see the informal collection channel. And then the informal collection basically see many actors working. You have, for example, truck tailgaters. These are people who work for the municipalities or for the concessionaires, but they also have a side hustle on the to create some income for themselves, to sell some recyclables. You have recycling center, junk buyback centers, junk shops, small collectors, pickers, building cleaners. For example, in most urban areas where you have high rises, the cleaners of the high rises also they make some income on the side by collecting recyclables. At the landfill level, you have scavengers, you have landfill mining, so people who actually go to landfills and collect recyclables directly at the landfill site. So all these entities they make up the informal sector, and sometimes they also encroach with the formal sector. So sometimes there's no distinct border or line or boundary that divides the two. Yeah. The materials then, the recyclables then get to large aggregators, traders, or small recyclers, and eventually they get to recyclers. The recyclers are quite big in Malaysia. We're quite lucky because there is a good number of large recyclers. But historically, recyclers in Malaysia are large because they import a lot of feedstock from other countries. Yes. So currently, the government of Malaysia is trying to limit the importation of feedstock. So recyclers are currently pushed to source their feedstock from domestic sources. But unfortunately, it's a bit of a chicken and egg situation because unless EPR is implemented, this flow of domestic material to recyclers is quite poor. So this is the kind of problem, structural problem that we are facing in Malaysia. So the informal sector, just a key take-home message, is not homogeneous. It includes individuals, organized groups, NGOs, and semi-formal businesses. This diversity means that a blanket regulation or a blanket approach or one way of deal with all of them, it's not really the way to go. And the segmentation is really essential. How do we work with the informal sector? So obviously, as I said before, we are currently in voluntary EPR, so EPR is not mandated in Malaysia. But what we do, we ask our members, the big brands that work with us to tell us what's their packaging footprint. So we need to, that is the starting point. The starting point is to understand how much packaging they put on the market and what sort of materials they put on the market with their packaging. So is this PET? Is this LDPE? Is this HDPE? Aluminium, beverage cartons, whatever. And then we design some collection programs. Okay, some of these collection programs involve us working directly with recyclers. So basically, we ask recyclers that we have qualified beforehand to intercept, to collect specific materials, specific quantities on our behalf. And then the recyclers activate their own network. Their own network, which is basically the first layer is with formal aggregators, and then as it goes down, it becomes less and less formal. So all the projects that we got involved with, we try to actually go into the full supply chain and reach the lowest level of the chain to understand how the informal sector works and how the recyclables flow from the bottom up to the recycler. In this particular way, in this particular modus operandi, in this particular way of collecting, what we do, we pay to the recycler an assistance fee, which basically comes from the EPR fee. And this assistance fee is then trickled down the chain in order to create a premium price on the step up is prepared to pay for the material, okay? Which means that there is an incentive for the informal sector and all the participating collectors to be part of this program. Obviously, we want something in return, and what we want in return is to have traceability of the recyclables. So we need to understand the provenance. We need to understand that they actually come from these materials come from post-consumer packaging, and they come from domestic packaging, and also we need to understand that there's no double counting, which is very often the case. So you need to prevent double counting, because otherwise you end up, counting twice or three times the same amounts. Yes. So the risk of designing EPR without the informal sector obviously has a big impact on the social well-being of the informal sector. We already seen that, and we have big problems in disrupting the existing collection flows. So if we don't acknowledge that the informal sector play a very important role, and we go ahead without making sure that the informal sector is well integrated into the system, then we will definitely risk disrupting collection flows. But also another very important function of the informal sector is that they allow for collection of very high quality recyclables. Yes, and very high quality recyclables are extremely important because you can be very precise and say, so I want, for example, transparent PET, clean. I want, that HDPE with a certain specification. So if you request certain things and you are prepared to pay a premium price for that, the informal sector is very good with delivering what you expect. Here the important thing to say is that EPR is not a compliance mechanism, it is a financing architecture. It's really important to say that. The obliged industries, the big brand fees, the pay EPR fees must be strategically deployed to strengthen the early stage collection ecosystem where the informal actors operate rather than replacing existing systems. So with this in mind, EPR must make the collection visible, especially in the context of the integration of the informal sector. We need to make the collection visible. We need to, as much as possible, make the collection safe for the informal sector. And we need to make informality work with the formal system. And let me share with you what I mean with these three components. So making the collection visible, is very important. Our position vis-a-vis the informal sector has actually changed over the last couple of years. Initially, we wanted to we were advocating for each informal actor to be formalized, okay? And then we saw that that was totally unrealistic, not because there are too many or because you cannot find them, because simply very often they don't want to be formalized. So instead of trying to regulate thousands of individual collectors and try to make them formal, it's really important to work with the formalization of the sorting centers where they actually deliver the material. So we believe that, for example, by targeting aggregation points such as buyback centers, we are able to access and verify the data where material flow coverage takes place, allowing for auditing and verification practices. So over the last couple of years, we've worked with a number of mobile apps, for example. And initially, as I said, we were trying to get informal collectors to log in into the mobile apps, and then we saw that it was very difficult, especially because we had requirements that they couldn't meet. And then we decided to shift that responsibility not to the individual, but to the collection center, the first step collection center, like the buyback centers or the junk shops, for example. And we saw that we could get them to comply. We could get them to log in and to register all the collections, and that started, this process of tracing the collections, tracing the materials, understanding the provenance, and this is extremely important. So we now can track back from buyback centers, so where the first collection is actually given to, straight to the recyclers, and this is very important. So making the collection visible is important. Another pathway for integration. So another thing that needs to be done when integrating the informal sector into EPR is making the collection safer. So what we have created, for example, is this Maria's Care Package. The Maria Care Package is basically to provide a first level of health support to the informal sector in the form of first aid and medications. So informal sectors they receive some vouchers they can spend in healthcare products or pharmacies. And basically, this is the first step support that we would give them. But as we deliver this type of vouchers, we're also thinking of providing them with other resources and other type of support like training and to those who want to be formalized, also a support to become more formal. So it's really important to provide this type of service. And also for us, it was a little bit difficult to understand how to do this, because obviously you need to give out these vouchers, these benefits, let's say, using a very clear, transparent governance methodology. And that was not clear to us how to do it. And then we found a partner, an external partner that allows us to do it very nicely, very transparently, and in a very 100% auditable way, which is for us extremely important.
Hi, Roberto. Sorry, just to let you know to wrap up in the next few minutes if you can.
Yeah. So the last part of the pathway of integration is basically making sure that the informal sector is actually part of the formal collection. So there has to be integration between the formal collectors and the informal collectors. Again, this is one of our schematics, but basically this is a model of integration between the state-appointed operators and the informal sector. We believe that moving forward, we need to avoid as much as possible that the state-appointed operators keep on fighting the informal sector, but they actually work together. So we advocate for the state-appointed operators to become also buyback centers where the informal collectors can sell their collection to. In this way, you would avoid that kind of friction, that kind of constant fighting, and you would transform that into a synergy, which would be extremely useful for both increasing the recovery rate, but also the quality of material that is recovered. So let me just go straight to the call to action. So just to conclude, the informal sector exists as a reality in Malaysia, but also in other countries. And as a response to the gaps in the formal collection of recyclables, EPR should be used to enhance the existing skills, livelihood, and rights of the informal sector. Informal actors are not interested in formalization, therefore the focus should be on integration. And the policy should create alignment with formal systems where possible, whilst ensuring minimum standards facilitating social and economic mobility. Yeah, so this is my final slide. Thank you very much, and I'm available to answer some questions.
Thank you. Thank you, Roberto, for your presentation. It really clearly showed how essential the informal sector is in Malaysia's recycling system. But as we know, how important and integral the informal sector is in the recycling and waste management systems around the world. Yeah, and very great points about the integration rather than formalization. I'll give the floor for questions. I see we already have a few in the chat, but please feel free to raise your hand if you have any questions. We can start off with the most recent question in the chat. I think the question was on a few slides back, saying the informal waste collectors pay an EPR fee at buyback centers so that the recycled goods are processed and they get eventually paid. They don't, yeah, they're questioning and if they understand the process correctly.
All right. So, no, the informal sectors do not pay EPR fees. The informal sector, they make money by selling recyclables. Yes. So you need to picture that you have these people going around, sometimes with a bicycle, sometimes with a tricycle, sometimes with a little van or lorry, and they go from place to place collecting these recyclables. Okay. And this happens in parallel with the normal waste management operators, okay? And sometimes they actually fight each other. So when they collect, and they actually focus only on materials where they can make money, okay? So materials where they can make money include obviously aluminium, iron, and stuff like that. That's for sure. But when talking about post-consumer packaging, PET is very valuable. HTP, so PET is basically bottles of Coca-Cola, soft drinks. HDP is bottles of shampoo, soap, etc. These are valuable, hard plastics, and there is a very specific value. So once they collect enough of these materials, they go to normally a junk shop. A junk shop is the first entry point. Okay, this value chain is made of different layers. The layer at the bottom is normally a junk shop. In Indonesia, it's called waste bank. They have different names in different places, and basically they give the collection and they get paid immediately, cash in hand. Okay, so that's how it works. Then the junk shop does the first point of aggregation, and then the junk shop, when they have enough, they sell to a bigger aggregator. Okay, and then they sell to another aggregator that is also a trader, and then they sell to a recycler. So the material gets to the recycler after having exchanged hands probably 3 to 4 times. I hope I answered the question. Anybody
I think
else?
you covered it. But yeah, feel free
Yeah.
to raise your hand if anyone needs further clarifications. We had a question on if you know what the informal sector looks like in Jordan, UAE, Egypt, and Turkey.
Not specifically, but for example, in Turkey, I would assume it would be similar to Malaysia. So Malaysia is, just for your information, is considered a developed economy. Is right at the border between a developing economy, a developed economy in terms of GDP per capita. Yes. So currently, the GDP per capita of Malaysia, I think, makes Malaysia a developed economy. So the configuration, the morphology, the way the informal sector is shaped in a given country is very much linked to the GDP of that country, okay? And the willingness of people to create income by picking recyclables informally, okay? And we see this changing really depending on the wealth of the country, but also is very much related to the infrastructure, the waste management infrastructure that exists in that particular country. If the waste management infrastructure in that particular country is organized in a way to collect for recycling, so they are already, the waste management operators, they're already collecting, sorting, and then channeling the recyclables to recyclers, then the informal sector operates in a different way. If in a country, like in Malaysia, for example, the waste management system is not geared, is not organized to collect for recycling, then the informal sector operates in a different way, yes? So these are all factors that influence the way the informal sector operates and the kind of segmentation, the different components of the informal sector, because as I said to you before, there are different components of the informal sector. Julia, please, can we hear your voice?
Yes, you can hear me, and now you can see me hopefully
Fantastic.
as well. Thanks a lot for the presentation. I got a question to, you were talking earlier about making collection visible, so collecting data about collection. And for this, if I understood correctly, you said you implemented a system that kind of collects the data on the ways that it's being collected. What kind of incentive did you give to the system participants, so to the informal sector, to the junk shops, to install such a system where they have to collect the data? Because for them, it's an effort they didn't have to do before. So what kind of incentives were given to them to actually do it and collect it?
Yeah, this is a very good question. So first of all, as I said before, we were not sure where to intervene, okay? And initially, we started, we wanted to intervene directly at the collector level. So we tried to force collectors, single collectors, to enter data into this mobile app, okay? And we started with the assumption that, you know, because they all have mobile phones, they should be able to do it, okay? But it doesn't work that way, because either they don't want to do it, or they have many other reasons not to do it. For example, some of them, they just want to be off the radar completely, and so on and so forth. So then we decided to shift the responsibility one level up. And basically that is the first collection point. Could be, for example, the junk shop that I was mentioning to you before. And then obviously the second question is, how do you force them? How do you not force? How do you persuade them to collect the information that you need in order to put in place a full traceability system? And basically the only way to do it is money, but you don't pay them to put in the data. What you do, and basically the way it works is that you pay, or EPR, the PRO, us, okay, Maria, we pay a fee to the recycler. We call it assistance fee, okay? And this assistance fee is then trickled down the chain, okay, and creates a premium price to the materials that we collect for this particular program, okay? So let's say, for example, that for 1 kilo of PET, normally you get 30 cents Malaysian ringgit, okay? It doesn't say anything to you, but trust me for that. So then if you are part of this program, okay, you get a premium price of 20 cents. For example, it could be 50 cents, okay? So that premium price is enough for them to make the extra effort to comply to this, and make sure, for example, that another important point is the quality of the material. So we reject, for example, contaminated material. We reject plastics that is contaminated with food. We reject, so you basically have this pricing. You can gauge, you can move, you can adjust this pricing in order to get these people to comply. And you want them to comply on providing data, but you want also them to comply with delivering quality recyclables.
Okay, makes sense. Thank you.
No problem.
Thank you, Roberto. I think we've run out of time, but there are a few more questions in the chat. We can speak about potentially answering them offline, or if you want to answer one more question, we can answer one more.
You tell me, Lucy. Pick one, and I'll let you pick the one you want.
Okay. Yeah, since this question was liked by another, the last question is, how can we integrate all of this in a system that improves separation at source and where less valuable materials reach waste pickers?
Well, so there's no one single element. So the recipe for EPR is a multi-ingredient recipe. In order to make EPR work, you need to really, the PRO is like an orchestra director, if you wish. So you need to work with a lot of different elements and make sure that they work together. The last thing you want to do as a PRO is to reinvent the wheel. So use the money that you get from the industry, from the obligated companies, to replicate, for example, collection systems, because the waste management system in that particular country doesn't work. So you want to replicate, so you buy vehicles and all the rest. So as much as possible, what you need to do is figure out where are the gaps and make sure that the money from extended producer responsibility is used to fill those gaps. Okay, so it took us quite a bit of time in Malaysia to understand where the gaps are, and basically we have gaps with the formal waste management operators because they don't do SEPA. SEPA is communication, education, and public awareness activities. Okay, communication, education, and public awareness activities are very important services that you need to deploy in order to educate consumers on separation at source. Okay, so I would assume that in Malaysia, EPR money will be used also for that. Then another big gap that we have in Malaysia, for example, are MRFs, material recovery facilities, and sorting. So you need to deploy money from EPR funding that go and fill that gap of sorting and getting the right materials. Yes, and then you need to limit as much as possible the fighting between different operators and them working in harmony and creating synergies. And that is another big challenge that we have in Malaysia. So for me, I wouldn't say there is one approach. There is first and most importantly, the task of understanding the system. And then the fact that you, with EPR, you want to scale the recovery of recyclables and understand where the money needs to be plugged in order to maximize the efficiency of the new EPR legislation. And this is, in my point of view, very, very important. So you need to spend quite a bit of time to study what you're dealing with and deploy your resources in a very targeted way. Informal sector is extremely important, and the informal sector will be a crucial part of EPR deployment in Malaysia, but in all the neighboring countries, I can tell you that.
Definitely. Thank you, Roberto. We still have more questions, but we can try to discuss how we can answer them offline. But thank you so much for coming and presenting today. Yeah, I hope everyone has a great rest of their afternoon and evening, and we'll be sure to share the recording and the slides after this call.
Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
We'd love to
Thank
have you
you
again.
very much.
Thank you.
Have a good day.